Madam!
Madam, we are very grateful for your help. We wouldn't have survived the night without you.
I didn't do anything.
Elderly widow shelters, 20 freezing bikers. Next morning, 100 Hell's Angels stops outside her door. When Margaret Chen opened her door to 20 freezing bikers during Colorado's worst blizzard, she had no idea they'd return with 100 brothers to wage war against the corporation trying to steal her home. February wind howled through Pine Ridge, Colorado, rattling Margaret Chen's farmhouse windows as the century's worst blizzard buried the mountain town under 4 feet of snow. At 8:47 p.m., temperatures plummeted to minus 25 degrees while power lines snapped, leaving most residents without heat. Margaret's wood-burning stove provided the only warmth visible for miles, its orange glow flickering through her kitchen window like a beacon calling desperate souls home through the Arctic darkness. At 73, Margaret had lived alone since her husband Robert's death, surviving on his railroad pension while facing foreclosure that would destroy her in 3 days. Blackstone Development Corporation had been pressuring her for months, offering 30 cents on the dollar for land they wanted to transform into luxury ski resort. When she refused their lowball offer, Blackstone accelerated foreclosure proceedings through Pine Ridge Bank connections, giving her until Friday, 72 hours away, to pay $47,000 or lose everything. Their lawyer had made the threat explicit. "Mrs. Chen, we'll have sheriff's deputies remove you physically if necessary." Margaret had accepted defeat with quiet dignity, planning to move into Denver senior housing after losing the only home she'd ever known. Tonight's blizzard felt symbolic nature, burying her old life under snow that would melt to reveal Blackstone's victory come spring. But Margaret still believed in hospitality over self-preservation, kindness over caution, values that would soon test everything she thought she knew about justice. Through frosted windows, Margaret saw headlights struggling up her mountain road, 20 motorcycles fighting through knee-deep snow, riders hunched against wind that killed exposed humans in minutes. The bikers were trapped, machines useless in conditions that had closed highways for 50 miles. Margaret faced her defining choice: preserve her own dwindling resources or share them with intimidating strangers who might be dangerous. Sometimes angels wear leather jackets and ride steel horses through winter storms. The lead biker's fist pounded Margaret's door with desperate urgency. "Please, ma'am, we're freezing our asses out here." Margaret opened her door to 20 leather-clad giants covered in ice, faces blue with hypothermia, motorcycles abandoned like frozen sculptures. The leader, a bearded mountain named Tank Morrison, could barely speak through chattering teeth. "Ma'am, we're Hell's Angels Denver chapter. Got caught in this shitstorm, highways closed, motels full. We'll pay you, sleep in your barn, whatever. Just need shelter before somebody dies." Margaret studied their desperate faces, recognizing the same helplessness she felt facing Blackstone's lawyers. "Come inside before you freeze to death." They filled her living room like giants in a dollhouse, massive frames overwhelming her floral furniture. Tank noticed family photos, Robert in his railroad uniform, grandchildren she rarely saw since moving to expensive cities. "Ma'am, you live here alone?" Tank asked with protective concern that surprised her. 3 days left, then Blackstone Corporation takes it for their ski resort," Margaret replied matter-of-factly. Margaret's strategy came from farm wife practicality: feed people first, logistics later. She emptied her pantry, preparing every scrap: homemade soup, leftover pot roast, bread, vegetables, coffee brewed constantly on her wood stove. "Lady, we can't take your food," Tank protested, seeing her sacrifice meals for strangers. "You've already done too much." "Robert always said this house was meant for hospitality. Besides, what good is food if there's nobody left to eat it?" As bikers thawed, stories emerged they'd been riding to Utah for a brother's funeral when unexpected storm trapped them. Most were veterans, business owners, family men whose leather hid deeper humanity. "Mrs. Chen, you're risking everything for people you don't know," observed Preacher Davis, chapter chaplain. "Most folks would have called cops on us." "Son, I'm losing this house Friday anyway," Margaret smiled sadly. "Tonight might be my last chance to practice real hospitality here." Tank's expression hardened. "What kind of bastards steal houses from old ladies?" Margaret had no idea she'd just recruited an army. 20 Hells Angels spent the night sleeping on floors, couches, anywhere they could fit in Margaret's cramped house. She gave them Robert's clothes to replace frozen leathers, shared blankets, kept fires burning through the night. By morning, crystal-clear skies revealed a transformed world buried under snow, sparkling like diamonds. Margaret prepared breakfast with remaining supplies, eggs, bacon, coffee that filled the house with warmth. "Mrs. Chen, you saved 20 lives last night," Tank said as they prepared to leave. "Hell's Angels don't forget kindness like that." Margaret watched them dig out motorcycles, feeling familiar loneliness return as temporary companions prepared for departure. "You boys be careful out there." Tank paused at his Harley, studying Margaret with military assessment. "Lady, what exactly is this Blackstone Corporation doing to you?" Margaret explained the foreclosure details, corporate pressure, legal manipulation she couldn't afford to fight. Tank's jaw tightened with dangerous focus. "Mrs. Chen, you just helped brothers in need. Now brothers help you." She had no idea that opening her door had just declared war on Blackstone Development. Day 2, Tank called Margaret before noon. "Mrs. Chen, we researched this Blackstone outfit. They've pulled the same foreclosure scam on 17 elderly homeowners across 3 states. You're not their first victim." Margaret felt validation mixed with despair. "Tank, knowing doesn't change anything. I still can't pay $47,000 by Friday." "Maybe you won't have to. We're making inquiries." That afternoon, Blackstone's harassment escalated. Surveyor teams arrived without permission, trampling her garden while taking measurements. Their supervisor, Bradley Walsh, made no effort to hide his contempt. "Lady, this shack gets demolished anyway. Take our offer and leave with dignity instead of being dragged out by deputies." Margaret stood on her porch, watching strangers evaluate her life's work like worthless debris. The house where she'd raised children, nursed a dying husband, and found meaning through decades was being appraised for destruction. Tank arrived unexpectedly, his massive Harley announcing territorial challenge to Blackstone's crew. Day 3. Word spread through Hell's Angels networks faster than social media. Tank had contacted chapter presidents across Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico. Bikers who'd heard about Margaret's blizzard kindness began offering support. "Mrs. Chen, brothers from 6 states want to help," Tank reported, "but we need evidence of Blackstone's fraud before we can act." Margaret's situation worsened when she discovered Blackstone's connection to Pine Ridge Bank. They deliberately accelerated foreclosure to force below-market sales. Legal but morally bankrupt, using financial manipulation to steal property from vulnerable seniors. Local media portrayed Margaret sympathetically, but Blackstone's PR firm countered with narrative about unreasonable elderly residents blocking economic development. Community progress requires individual sacrifice, Blackstone CEO Thomas Blackstone announced. Sentimental attachment shouldn't impede regional growth. That evening, Margaret's power was mysteriously cut. Tank arrived to find her without heat, water, or phone sabotage designed to make living conditions unbearable. "This isn't foreclosure, it's elder abuse," Tank said grimly. Day 4. Morning. Margaret woke to find her water pipes frozen, fence damaged, and intimidating men in suits photographing her property from multiple angles. Blackstone was escalating psychological warfare beyond legal boundaries. Tank arrived with disturbing intelligence. "Mrs. Chen, Blackstone's planning something for tomorrow. Our contacts say they've hired private security firm and arranged emergency eviction procedures that bypass normal legal protections." Margaret's resolve finally cracked. "Tank, maybe I should surrender. I'm too old to fight corporations with unlimited resources." "Lady, you opened your door to 20 freezing strangers without asking questions. That takes more courage than these corporate bullies have ever shown." But Tank had been coordinating nationwide response. Margaret's story had become symbol of corporate elder abuse that demanded action from organization built to protect vulnerable people when official systems failed. "Mrs. Chen, you're not fighting alone anymore. Tomorrow morning, you'll see what brotherhood really means." Local police received anonymous tips about suspicious motorcycle activity throughout the region, but couldn't identify specific illegal behavior. Day 4. Evening. Blackstone's private security team established perimeter around Margaret's property, preparing for morning eviction that would circumvent legal protections through manufactured emergency procedures. "Ma'am, we have court orders authorizing immediate property seizure due to safety violations," Security Chief announced. "You'll be removed at dawn, whether you cooperate or not." Margaret called Tank in panic. "They're surrounding my house with armed men. This isn't legal foreclosure anymore." "Mrs. Chen, hold tight. Justice is coming." Through her windows, Margaret saw security vehicles blocking her driveway, floodlights turning her home into prison camp, corporate soldiers preparing for dawn assault on elderly widows' last sanctuary. Tank's voice carried deadly calm when he called at midnight. "Lady, whatever happens tomorrow, remember you showed kindness to strangers when you had nothing left to give. Now strangers are coming to show kindness to you." Margaret lay awake listening to engine sounds echoing through mountain valleys, understanding that morning would bring confrontation that would either save her home or destroy whatever hope remained. Sometimes justice thunders down mountain roads on 2 wheels, carrying righteous fury that shakes the earth beneath bullies' feet. Day 5, 5:30 a.m. Margaret woke to sound that seemed to rise from earth itself, low rumble growing steadily louder, rattling windows and vibrating through floorboards. She stepped onto her porch and gasped. Motorcycles! Hundreds of them! Streaming up her mountain road in formation that stretched beyond sight. Hell's Angels from across western United States, leather-clad riders creating river of chrome and steel that filled her valley with thunder of collective determination. They surrounded Blackstone's security perimeter, parked in pastures, lined both sides of her road with disciplined precision that spoke of military organization. Margaret counted at least 300 bikers, possibly more, wearing patches from dozens of chapters she'd never heard of. Thomas Blackstone arrived with reinforcement convoy, additional security personnel, corporate lawyers, and local officials he'd purchased through campaign contributions. His confidence evaporated seeing hundreds of bikers who'd traveled thousands of miles to protect one elderly widow. "What is this gathering?" Blackstone demanded, his voice betraying nervousness despite attempted authority. Tank Morrison approached with man. Margaret didn't recognize older biker whose patches indicated national leadership. "Mr. Blackstone, meet Thunder Mackenzie, Hells Angels national president. Flew in from Oakland after hearing about your business practices." Thunder Mackenzie stepped forward with bearing of someone accustomed to commanding respect through character rather than intimidation. "Mr. Blackstone, Mrs. Chen saved 20 lives during that blizzard, asking nothing in return. Hell's Angels protect people who show that kind of character." Blackstone's security team realized they were catastrophically outnumbered by bikers whose reputation for handling corporate bullying was legendary throughout Western states. "This is intimidation and harassment," Blackstone protested. "I'm calling federal authorities to disperse this illegal gathering." "Please do," Thunder replied calmly. "FBI investigators are already en route. Seems they've been building case against your fraudulent foreclosure practices in multiple states." Margaret watched in amazement as FBI vehicles emerged from among the motorcycles. Special Agent Sarah Martinez approached Blackstone with arrest warrants prepared based on evidence Hells Angels had provided federal authorities. But Blackstone had one final card. "Agent Martinez, I have legal right to this property. No amount of motorcycle intimidation changes binding foreclosure agreements." Thunder smiled with dangerous calm. "Mr. Blackstone, our legal team discovered something interesting about those foreclosure documents." Tank handed Martinez a thick folder. "Forged signatures, backdated legal papers, fraudulent notarizations. Your entire foreclosure is criminal conspiracy." The trap was revealed as additional FBI agents surrounded Blackstone's entire operation. What appeared to be spontaneous biker gathering was actually federal law enforcement operation using Hells Angels resources and intelligence networks. "Thomas Blackstone, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and RICO violations," Agent Martinez announced as handcuffs replaced corporate arrogance. Margaret watched the man terrorizing her led away in federal custody, while his security team was detained for questioning about their role in systematic elder abuse operation. "Mrs. Chen," Thunder said gently, "Blackstone Development's assets are frozen pending investigation. Your foreclosure is dismissed, and you'll receive substantial compensation for harassment and illegal intimidation." Margaret stared at documents that transformed her from homeless victim to secure homeowner, with single morning's work by an army of bikers who remembered her kindness. Sometimes justice wears leather jackets and rides motorcycles, arriving with thunder that drowns out corporate lies and corruption. With Blackstone arrested and his company under federal investigation, Margaret's property was immediately protected while authorities calculated restitution for systematic fraud affecting dozens of elderly victims across multiple states. Thunder Mackenzie approached Margaret with documentation prepared by Hells Angels legal team working with federal prosecutors. "Mrs. Chen, preliminary estimates show Blackstone owes you approximately $300,000 in damages plus legal fees. Their seized assets will cover everything. Margaret studied papers that secured not just her home, but comfortable retirement she'd never dared imagine. "Mr. Mackenzie, I don't understand how this happened so quickly." "Ma'am, Hell's Angels have been investigating corporate fraud against veterans and seniors for years. Your case provided the evidence we needed to bring down entire criminal enterprise." The assembled bikers began organizing what would become largest charitable event in Colorado history, as Margaret's property transformed into headquarters for systematic elder protection operations. Over the next 6 hours, Margaret's 40-acre property became massive organizational hub as Hell's Angels chapters established comprehensive victim assistance programs for other Blackstone targets across western states. "Mrs. Chen, we've identified 67 elderly homeowners defrauded by Blackstone's operation," Tank reported, now coordinating between federal investigators and victim advocacy groups. "Your courage in accepting help saved dozens of families from losing their homes." Margaret watched bikers portrayed by media as criminals demonstrate organizational skills surpassing most legitimate businesses. They established legal aid stations, victim counseling services, financial planning assistance for people targeted by corporate predators. "Ma'am, would you consider permanent partnership?" Thunder asked. "We need headquarters for Hell's Angels Elder Protection Program, national organization dedicated to investigating and preventing corporate fraud against vulnerable populations." The proposal meant Margaret's quiet retirement would be replaced by constant activity as her home became center of national organization protecting elderly citizens from corporate exploitation. "Mr. Mackenzie, I'm 73 years old and know nothing about running charitable organizations," Margaret protested. "Mrs. Chen, you know everything that matters how to treat people with dignity when they need help most," Thunder replied. "Hell's Angels provide security, legal expertise, organizational resources. You provide the heart that makes it meaningful." Margaret studied hundreds of bikers who'd traveled across country to support her, understanding that her simple act of kindness had grown into movement that could protect thousands of vulnerable people nationwide. What would Robert think about his quiet farmhouse becoming headquarters for motorcycle club operations? She wondered aloud. Margaret's decision came when she met other elderly Blackstone victims who'd traveled to Colorado after learning about successful resistance to corporate fraud. Seeing their relief at finding advocates willing to fight powerful enemies, she understood her true purpose. "Mr. Mackenzie, if this old farmhouse can serve people who need help fighting enemies too powerful for individual resistance, then that's what Robert and I would want," Margaret said with quiet determination. Thunder smiled with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Chen, this house was already serving people who needed help. Now we're just expanding operations." The transformation was immediate as Hell's Angels established permanent facilities, legal offices, victim counseling centers, communication networks, serving elder protection programs throughout western United States. 6 months later, Margaret's farmhouse operated as headquarters for Hell's Angels Elder Protection Program, serving over 800 elderly victims of corporate fraud annually. Federal prosecution of Blackstone development resulted in criminal convictions, asset forfeiture, victim compensation funds totaling $25 million. Margaret, now president of Elder Protection Program Board, worked with Hell's Angels leadership coordinating investigation and prevention of corporate crimes, targeting vulnerable populations. "Mrs. Chen, you saved 20 lives in a blizzard," Tank observed during their weekly planning meeting. "But opening your door that night saved thousands of elderly people from losing homes to corporate criminals." Margaret smiled, understanding her small farmhouse had become exactly what she'd dreamed: sanctuary, where people found help when they needed it most. Margaret's farmhouse became model for community-based elder protection programs nationwide, with Hells Angels chapters establishing similar facilities in 18 states. Federal legislation named the Margaret Chen Elder Protection Act provided funding for investigating corporate fraud targeting vulnerable populations. Margaret received Presidential Medal of Freedom for advocacy work, accepted on behalf of all elderly citizens fighting corporate predators. The program recovered over $75 million in fraudulent charges and prevented thousands of illegal foreclosures. 5 years later, Margaret's 80th birthday drew Hells Angels from across North America to honor the woman whose blizzard kindness launched movement protecting thousands of vulnerable elderly citizens from corporate exploitation. She learned that opening your door during life's worst storms sometimes means opening it to possibilities beyond imagination, that one night's hospitality can transform into lifetime commitment to serving others who need sanctuary from predators disguised as legitimate businessmen. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we choose compassion over caution. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we choose compassion over caution.